Several pages in the FMC give you both RNP and ANP. Push the legs key. The legs page shows RNP ANP information next to line select key 6 left. Now let's look at RNP ANP on position page 3, the pause shift page. Push the initialization reference key. Show the index page. Push line select key 2 left to show position page 1, the position initialization page. Push previous page to show page 3. Pause shift page 3 shows RNP ANP information next to line select key 4 left. You can also see RNP ANP on progress page 4 of 4. Push the progress key to display the progress page. Push previous page to show page 4. Progress page 4 displays lateral RNP ANP information and vertical RNP ANP. Knowing your RNP and ANP are important, but these numbers alone do not tell you if you are actually on course. Remember, RNP tells you how accurate your onboard navigation system must be. And ANP measures how accurate your navigation system actually is. Let's look at how you can use this information. To determine where the airplane is relative to its programmed flight path, the flight crew has several sources of information available to them. Progress page 4 shows cross-track error. This is an indication of how far the airplane is left or right from the designated Lnav course. On the navigation display, or ND, the lateral path deviation annunciation displays below the airplane symbol when an active Lnav path is defined. The letters L and R signify deviation to the left or right of course. The airplane's current lateral RNP and ANP values are displayed digitally below the lateral path deviation annunciation. To graphically show the airplane's ANP relative to the RNP, new features have been added to the primary flight display, or PFD. The Lnav deviation scale appears directly below the ADI. It presents current lateral RNP-ANP information. The VNav deviation scale displays vertically along the right side of the ADI. This scale presents current vertical RNP-ANP information. Both scales display whenever Lnav or any VNav mode is engaged. The VNav deviation scale does not display vertical ANP bars or the VNav path pointer until the FMC enters a descent mode. When heading select is engaged, the scales remain displayed as long as the airplane remains within either 1 nautical mile from the Lnav course or within twice the current lateral RNP value from the Lnav course, whichever is the greater distance. In this example, with the lateral RNP equal to 2 nautical miles, as long as the airplane stays within 4 nautical miles from the Lnav course, the Lnav and VNav deviation scales will remain enunciated. When a deviation scale is present, a scale ID enunciation displays above the upper left corner of the ADI. This enunciation indicates the source of the displayed deviation for each scale. In this example, the scale ID enunciation Lnav-Vnav indicates Lnav is the source of the lateral deviation display, and Vnav is the source of the vertical deviation display. Many combinations of enunciations are possible depending on the source of the displayed deviation for the specific deviation scale. Now let's take a closer look at the Lnav deviation display. The Lnav deviation scale is similar in function to the ILS localizer indication on an ILS approach, but the appearance has been altered to avoid confusion with the ILS indications. Anytime Lnav or Vnav is engaged and an approach mode is not engaged, the Lnav and Vnav deviation scales display. The Lnav deviation scale has two outer indices and a center index. The center index represents the airplane's present position. The distance between the center index and the left or right outer index represents the current RNP distance. A magenta Lnav deviation pointer represents the position of the Lnav flight path programmed in the FMC. When the airplane is on the programmed Lnav flight path, the Lnav deviation pointer is centered under the center index as shown here. If the airplane moves off the Lnav course, the Lnav deviation pointer moves to indicate the relative position of the programmed Lnav course. If the pointer moves to the deflection limit, it becomes an unfilled pointer outline. The white horizontal bars represent the navigation system's current ANP relative to the RNP. The ANP bars originate from the outer index and expand inward as ANP increases. When ANP equals RNP, the ANP bars touch in the middle of the scale. Using the Lnav deviation scale, the flight crew can determine how far off course the airplane can fly before it may be outside of the RNP-defined route. This may be especially helpful if the airplane must navigate off the Lnav flight path for any reason. Recall that ANP represents the navigation system's uncertainty about its present position calculation. It is a significant part of the navigation system's total error and generally can't be controlled by the flight crew. The other significant part of the navigation system's total error is controllable by the flight crew. This part is called the Flight Technical Error, or FTE. FTE measures how well the airplane tracks the lateral and vertical paths computed by the airplane's navigation system. On the Lnav deviation scale, the space between the ANP bars represents the allowable FTE. Subtracting RNP from ANP gives you the allowable FTE. Let's assume you are flying on a route requiring an RNP of 2.0 and your current ANP is 0.8. Your FTE would be the difference between RNP and ANP, or 1.2 nautical miles either side of the course. As long as your airplane stays within the FTE distance from the navigation system's computed flight path, you will always meet the RNP criteria. If you deviate from the programmed flight path, the Lnav deviation pointer moves to indicate the deviation. If you continue to move further away from the flight path, the Lnav deviation pointer moves past the edge of the ANP bar. This indicates you have exceeded the FTE limit. If the pointer remains outside of the FTE for more than 10 continuous seconds, the ANP bars turn amber to alert the flight crew to the possibility that the airplane may be outside of the RNP-defined track. In this example, ANP has not exceeded RNP. The Lnav deviation pointer is still within the RNP outer index. Because the airplane has deviated too far from the programmed lateral flight path, there is a possibility the actual airplane present position is no longer within the RNP limit distance defining the route. The actual airplane present position could be anywhere within the ANP circle, and part of that circle is now outside of the RNP defined route. In this case, the airplane does not meet RNP constraints. As the airplane approaches its destination, anticipation cues or ghost pointers will display on the deviation scales when valid approach course deviation information is available from the selected ILS, GLS, or IAN approach and the airplane's current track is not greater than 90 degrees from the approach front course. The anticipation cues or ghost pointers display if the corresponding Lnav and Vnav deviation scales and pointers also display. The ghost pointers display as unfilled white diamond symbols, slightly smaller than the normal localizer glide slope pointers. They display at the same location that localizer and/or glide slope pointers would normally display. Here, the scale ID enunciation is Lnav Vnav. This indicates the deviation scale pointers display Lnav and Vnav deviation information. If the engaged lateral mode subsequently transitions to loc, Lnav deviation indications will be removed, and normal ILS localizer indications will display. The lateral deviation information on the scale now comes from the localizer. The source of vertical deviation information remains Vnav. This is reflected by the scale ID enunciation loc Vnav. When the engaged vertical mode subsequently transitions to glide slope, Vnav deviation indications are removed and normal ILS glide slope indications display. The ghost pointer is replaced with a glide slope indicator. Since both lateral and vertical deviation are now localizer and glide slope, the scale ID enunciation changes to ILS.